I love that they are incorporating strong women from history into this season as well. Hey, I'm Amy and welcome back. Season 11, episode 3 of Doctor Who is called Rosa, and it is all about, or for the most part, about Rosa Parks and the big event surrounding her refusing to give up her seat on a segregated bus. There is a really great underlying story that ties it all in together with the Doctor and time travel that I absolutely loved, but before we get into that, I wanted to give a brief recap of what happened at the end of last episode before we get into the big nitty-gritty of this episode. So where we left off in the last episode, it was a little bit more of a one-off episode of character building and getting to know the companions and the Doctor and the whole universe a little bit more now that there is a new showrunner and a new Doctor and pretty much a new everything. The Stenza, who we know from the first episode with Tim Shaw, were mentioned again, and those little cloth creatures, I don't think we ever really got the name of those, called the Doctor the Timeless Child, which I know will probably show up yet again in the future. And at the very end of the episode, we finally got a look inside the new TARDIS, which I absolutely loved. It looks so cool, and I love how they incorporated the Doctor's new Sonic into the TARDIS, but we also were getting left off with them leaving and the Doctor taking them back home. And of course, you can probably predict that probably was not going to happen. So before I get too far into episode 3, just be warned, from this point forward, there will probably be some spoilers. So of course, we all had that feeling that they weren't quite going to get back to England in their own time period, especially after seeing the preview at the end of last episode. I had an even bigger feeling that they weren't going to be there, but I was really excited after seeing that preview because it was going to be set in America and it was going to be centered around a real-life historical event, which they don't often do in Doctor Who, and I love how they handle them a lot of the times because, like, Vincent and the Doctor is probably one of my top 5 favorite episodes of Doctor Who, and I wanted to see maybe how they would handle Rosa and some of the interracial things with Grant and Ryan, and how they would handle everything with Yas. I don't think there actually were any Pakistani people living in the southern part of the United States in 1955. But I loved the way they kind of handled the whole issue of racism and segregation, which they have handled in some ways in the past. They did it with Martha in the 2-parter where the Doctor loses his memory. He puts his memory into a pocket watch, and Martha is basically his maid and / a maid at the school. They don't really deal a whole lot of segregation, or a whole lot with segregation then, besides the fact that she's the maid. Some of it's not necessarily based on the color of her skin, it's based on her status, because there is also a white maid that they don't treat as bad as they treat Martha, but she still is a maid. So it's not like super handled in that episode, but last season with Bill, there was an episode called Thin Ice where they did something very similar to this, and it was set in the 1600s. Both of the Bill and Martha episodes were in the UK versus in the United States, where segregation and racism played a really big thing. It was a really big deal out here, and I only know American history. I'm sorry, I am American. So I don't know how racism and segregation and things like that were handled in the UK, but I feel like in the 1600s, which was when, was it the 1600s or this? It was in like 1800s. It was in the 1800s. The Bill episode last season, the Thin Ice episode, it was more based around not only the color of Bill's skin, but also the fact that she is a female. Females weren't really, or never were really allowed to do much, and Bill has always been such a very strong character, just a strong independent woman. So the whole racism plus the sexism issues were really the focus for Bill's character. It was more of a tertiary storyline throughout that episode, but it did play a big role in some parts, and I feel like they handled it very well. They did something similar with Ryan in this episode, the fact that he was black and he was a foreigner, and he didn't really quite understand the fact that there was this segregation and racism, but he still had an issue of keeping his temper in check. He even talked to Yaz about that a little bit, but she gave a really great quote that I absolutely love. She said that they don't win. The people that are mean to him or that are segregating them, in the end, they won't win, which I really, really love that quote, because not only can it be used against racism, but it can be used on any old asshole. And topics like this, even though they are pretty touchy, are things that we need to talk about, especially in society right now where all kinds of bad stuff is happening. And this was just a really great moment where something small in history changed the entire world. The big bad in this episode, his main focus was the small moments in history, and I don't think we've really ever had something like that, at least in New Who, to focus on and have the Doctor try to fix something like that. I feel like maybe there was some small things. Off the top of my head, I can't quite remember anything specifically, but I loved how they had to make timelines and figure out information based on things that they had learned in school or remembered about certain things, and that they brought Ryan's Nan, Claire, back into it a little bit with the fact that she loved Rosa Parks and she was a big fan of Martin Luther King Jr. and Ryan actually gets to meet Martin Luther King Jr. So cool. And how all of these little moments lead up to changing something huge and massive throughout the world. And going off of that very lighthearted subject, let's talk a little bit about the big bad in this, Krasko. He had a very cool motivation. Like I said earlier, he wanted to change just little minor things in history, because those little minute details are kind of what makes a bigger moment happen. The butterfly effect, which I don't think we have seen anything super butterfly effect-y in this New Who, and I really like that. And I know it would get a little repetitive if they brought it back again sometime, but I feel like it's just very excellent work of the writers to bring something really new to the table with a new way of storytelling that we haven't quite seen. And one little thing about Krasko that I thought was really fun that they slid in there a little bit, they only talked about it very shortly, is his time vortex, which we haven't seen one of those since Captain Jack was on. Maybe we'll get to see him again. I don't know, because timelines are all different. So maybe John Barrowman will be coming back? Theories? I don't think he will. Oh, well, I guess River had something very similar to that. So maybe there will be something with that. It could just be a little callback to past Doctor Who, like we've been seeing throughout this entire season so far. And finally, with Krasko, I have a theory. It's a very small theory, and I don't think it will pan out to anything really, is the way Ryan defeated him. It just felt a little too easy using that temporal displacer. It felt too easy. I feel like he's going to come back in some way. But it also could just be very, very lazy writing to get us to the end of the episode. Who knows? And then I have a theory. Well, it's not really a theory. It's more of an observation on the relationship between Ryan and Yaz. It just feels like at points they are hinting at something bigger between the two of them, something we haven't really found out, because we are still learning a little bit more about the companions in general, but also their backstories. And Ryan and Yaz used to be really good friends in primary school. They never really gave a very solid background on them. It's not something I'm like super focused on, but they keep bringing it up a little bit, so you don't really know if they are friends or if they are more than friends, because there was that little joke about Ryan paying Yaz a compliment based on the guy's room she snuck into back when they were in secondary school. So I don't know, who knows what's going to happen with that. I am certainly okay with it just them being friends, because it's weird to me sometimes when they add romance into Doctor Who, because I just want it to be a nice, fun sci-fi show. Although I did love Amy and Rory. To round out this episode, I want to talk a little bit about my favorite moment. When they are in the motel room, the Doctor starts writing on the wall, and Graham has this funny little quote, and the Doctor has a really funny little rebuttal, and it sort of plays into a little joke further down the line. Well, just a minute later. But Graham says, "You ain't Banksy," or something along those lines. And the Doctor looks at him and goes, "Or am I?" And later on, she makes a little joke that Banksy doesn't have that kind of marker, and then she says, "Or do I?" And I just thought it was super funny. It was just a super fun little moment within this pretty heavy episode. So that is everything I have for Doctor Who Season 11, Episode 3, Rosa. Let me know your favorite moments in the comments down below, or even what you have theories for coming up in this season, or just your thoughts on this episode in general. As always, thank you guys so much. I really truly do appreciate every single one of you. Let me know who you are in the comments down below, and let's be friends. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and subscribe if you're new, because I love talking all things movies, TV, filmmaking, film history, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye!